Welcome everyone. Happy holidays. My name is Todd Harris, Head of Marketing at Select, and I'll be your host for today's webcast. Thanks for joining. Joining me today is Select's VP of Business Development, Jose Chan, and our special guest, Deborah Weinswig from Fung Global Retail Technology. And in this webcast, we'll be covering some of the major themes and surprising moments of 2017, along with some predictions for 2018. Everyone's got their predictions, of course, and of course we have ours. And many of these themes, moments, and predictions are actually backed by data and some research conducted by FGRT, which will be referred to, as I previously mentioned, Fung Global Retail Technology. So it's great to have Deborah here. Deborah, thank you for joining. Jose, thank you for being here too. Before we get going, I'm just going to give a quick bio for Deborah. So Deborah is the Managing Director of Fung Global Retail Technology, as I mentioned before. She is an award-winning global retail analyst and a specialist in retail innovation and technology. Prior to Fung, Deborah spent 12 years at Citi Research, where she served as the head of global staples and consumer discretionary team. And a few accolades to kind of sprinkle on top. She's ranked as the #1 analyst by Institutional Investor for 10 years. She serves on the advisory board of several accelerators, including Alchemist Accelerator, The Cage, Entrepreneurs Roundtable Accelerator, Grand Central Tech, Plug and Play, and TrueStart. And to add on top of that, she's recently announced on LinkedIn as one of the top retail influencers of 2017. And on top of all that, she's also a certified public accountant with an MBA from University of Chicago. So Deborah, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So before you get going, before you start enlightening us with some of this awesome content, I just want to run through some basic housekeeping for everybody before we get going here. All lines are on mute. This is being recorded, and we'll have it available for your pleasure to replay in the next 18 to 24 hours or so. And when we do, we'll send an email out to everybody immediately after that. We will also put the slides up on SlideShare afterwards. That will happen today. And I encourage you to submit questions for the Q&A panel that you see there on the right. If we don't get to your question today, don't be offended. We will get to it. It just may not be live today, but we will get to it. So let's cover, before we get going here, let's cover the some background on Select before I cover what we're going to be covering today. Select helps retailers optimize their inventories throughout the merchandise planning and supply chain processes. This is accomplished by revealing the future demand of an assortment of products in store and online, allowing retailers to make better and smarter decisions about what to buy, how much to buy, and where to put it, and where to ship it from. And we do this through groundbreaking machine learning and optimization technologies. We're looking at the entire MP&A process, the merchandise planning and allocation process for a retailer, and we've mapped our solutions to them. Some of our customers, as you can see here, are well-known brands like Urban Outfitter, Aldo, Justice, Saks, Fifth Avenue, and they each, which is important here, they each have their own unique inventory challenges and optimization needs, and the opportunities here are great for each one of them along the routes of improved revenue margins and sell-through. And some of the underlying technology that helps us do what we do is part of the is part of the top 50 greatest innovations to come out of MIT's AI lab, alongside others such as the quantum computer, robotics, and email. And most recently, we've been included in two analyst research papers by Gartner, their Cool Vendor Report in Retail Merchandising, and the Magic Quadrant for Merchandise Assortment or Retail Assortment Management Applications. So I encourage you to check those guys out too. And as far as what we're going to cover today, at least what Deborah will cover, I would say, we just covered the introduction to Select, and Deborah will introduce you to Fung Global Retail Technologies. We're also going to cover some of the major retail trends of this year and also some seven surprises of 2017. And we'll also touch on some of the predictions for 2018. One of them, well, as you see here, is it the breakout year for AI? So Deborah, I will hand it off to you so you can tell everyone about Fung Group and a little bit about some of the research you guys are doing.
Great, thanks so much, and thanks again for having me. So the Fung Group is a conglomerate, and as you can see, we sit in the knowledge vertical. We also are joined there by the Fung Business Intelligence Center, and they have really an amazing team who focuses on China, basically China for China. And they also do an amazing amount of work in terms of the, I would say, the retail real estate landscape as well. We also have the Fung Academy in our knowledge group as well. And I would say the three of us all work together to really complement each other. And so if anyone on the line really needs anything in terms of the global landscape with regards to retail or technology, we're here to assist. In terms of the next slide, you can see with regards to FGRT, we really serve as the knowledge bank for the Fung Group. We focus on emerging retail and technology trends, and that's really on a global basis. We were established in 2014. We're fortunate enough to have teams in New York, London, Hong Kong, Israel, and India. And we publish thematic research and research with a global scope on topics such as omnichannel retail, fashion and retail trends, and disruptive technologies. A real focus on startups and how they're impacting the global landscape. And obviously what we've seen is a real change in terms of how I'd say established retailers are thinking about startups and working with them, not only from an acquisition perspective, but in terms of also growth and insights. And so we help, I would say, not only in terms of scouting, but also in terms of just, if you want to look at a particular vertical, let's say chatbots or facial recognition technology, or whether it might be robotics, especially in this, kind of new world of AI, who might be the right partner. We also have a retail intelligence index and many other indexes that we've built and that we're looking to build as well. In terms of the next slide, we're going to look at some major retail trends. And, as we're thinking about this, many of the retail trends and many of the shoppers' expectations are constantly evolving. Much of our inspiration, if you will, is coming from the East, as I would say the expectations are evolving much more quickly. And much of that is being shared on WeChat these days, which is a constant communication engine. So I think that consumers today are calling for different retail experiences, both online and offline. We look at this as this idea of new retail. So the pace is changing. There's a different connection with the consumer. Obviously, it's empowered by tech. But I do think that the idea of how the consumer thinks about their experience, this idea of gamification, it's at a whole different level than it's been in the past. And I think they're willing to shift from one retailer to the next in a different time period than they would have before. And they obviously share their experiences, whether it's through social media or it's in a different pace and in a different way than they have historically. And so I think that there are these, micro shops, there are different messaging apps, there's live streaming, there's, key opinion leaders, there's key influencers, and I do think that their expectations continue to evolve as a result of this. And so on the next slide, you'll see that the relationship with the consumer is also continuing to be reinvented. And we talk about this idea of conversations. And so not only are conversations between consumers changing, but I think that consumers' conversations with the retailer are changing as well. And so whether that's through a chatbot and this idea of a constant relationship with your consumer and being answered in real time, but this idea of a personalized, customized, localized experience. And then also I think this idea of community. We want this localized experience. We want to feel connected with our retailer. We want the retailer to feel like they know us and that they understand the community with which we live in. And we also want the retailer to give back and to give back to our local community. And that's increasingly important. And I feel that we're starting to see, and the other thing I think that, many retailers do give back, but they don't tell us that they're doing so. And so one of the things that we've continued to encourage retailers to do is to make sure that they communicate that. And whether that's through social media or in store, I don't like to use this word necessarily, but to make sure that they get credit for what they're doing as well. So on the next slide, it's this whole idea of redefining convenience. And we talk about this in a later slide, but I think that and I think AI is helping with this as well, but how do you look at the consumer's browsing history? So I always find it interesting when I have been shopping on a website, and then the next time that I visit, right, they suggest that I buy the product that I have just purchased, as opposed to if they understand my shopping history, they recommend something that I probably am about to run out of, and that they would have known that because of my purchasing history. The other idea is, right, understanding the audience, right, this personalization of products and services. So not only personalizing what they're offering me, but the ability for me to personalize, right? We all want to feel unique. And I think that's increasingly important in this world that we live in. And then obviously the ability to execute and, trend-driven innovation, right? The trends are changing at a faster pace than they ever have before. And so there was this idea of the, kind of see-through pants this year. I don't know if, it was like here in a flash and gone. But for the retailers to be able to kind of deliver those on a plate to us, but also to make sure that we are aware of the trends, because obviously we'll be purchasing those items in a much faster pace. And right, there might be trends that we missed because they were here and gone so quickly.
And Deborah,
so yeah,
this is Jose. So just to clarify, so these trends should be pretty seamless, or these experiences both in physical and the digital world, correct? This is for our audience.
They should be. That would be the idea, is that it should be seamless. And one of the things that I think can be challenging is that the consumer, and it can be in both places, right? They can go to the store and have this unbelievable, amazing experience, right? Great customer service. They can find everything very easily, right? Because it's either a store that they know, or they'll go to the store and there's either a physical map or the digital map of the store is so great. And then maybe they go online and it's clunkier, it's more challenging for them to shop. And so they might think about the retailer differently. Or it could be the exact opposite, right? The digital experience is so great and the physical one is not as, let's say, as pleasant. So I do think for retailers, we like to call it new retail versus omnichannel, or we'll call it, all channel. But I do think that this can be a very challenging, it can be challenging for them to deliver. So how do you, and it's this whole like buy online, pick up in store, or, click and collect. How do we just, you want to get their dollars, obviously. And right, they have the ability to spend. Right, I always call it, they can dig in their couch and, find a few more cents to spend. So how do you get them to spend more with you? And some of it's being in stock, and some of it, right, I mean, we just saw, and this whole last mile is obviously a challenge as well. So I love this slide. I actually borrowed this from Jerry Storch, and it's how do you, right, order from, fulfilled by, where received, but, it's kind of, right, if the consumer can dream it, how can you do it? Because, right, in this day and age, and there's sometimes too, I think that the most challenging thing is returning an item. So I met this company, and I love this idea, right, that I could be sitting in my office and they would send a courier to pick up the item that I wanted to return. And in some cases, the retailer would absorb the fee, and in some cases, I would have to pay for the fee. But just so that I could, return an item and not be stressed when I was, buying something that either if it didn't fit or I didn't like the color, that I didn't have to worry about how that item was going to kind of get back to the store. And from the store's perspective, or from the retailer's perspective, this idea also that, because sometimes, right, when it gets back to the store, it's an immediate markdown. that they might be able to save gross margin as well by investing in a service like this. So what we're finding also with, kind of in the startup world, that they're also helping retailers, if you will, rescue their margins because of, so many of the innovations. And you're obviously at Select, you're seeing this as well, because there's so much that's happening from an innovation perspective, that you can also partner with retailers to think about things in a, and provide data and insights back to them in a pace that they haven't seen, historically.
And for us, so, Deborah, the store angle here that you see, the word store is peppered all over this slide. For our customers, that's obviously a big point of it, of having a store as an advantage from a fulfillment perspective. And this was hammered home today in an article that I was reading on Retail Dive about how there's a 90% of Americans have a Walmart within 10 miles of them. So it just goes to show you, with the power that stores have because of their location.
Well, and I think Walmart is doing such an amazing job of this, with the acquisition of Jet and insights that they have gained from that, right, with this whole, buy online, pick up in store. And they, and from all the feedback that I have heard, and I would say it's been 100%, and if it could be 110% positive, right, because of the, everyone has said that when they've gone into the store to pick something up, it has been 100% seamless. And I would say their image of Walmart has gone to a whole different level. In fact, if you can believe it, I was at a dinner in Hong Kong last week, and everyone was sitting around the table talking about their experiences of shopping at a Walmart, but it had all been a digital experience where the men had gone into the store to pick up something in a physical box. And so, right, it's exactly to your point. I mean, it's completely changing the way people think about this retailer. So yeah, the world is changing, and I would say this is why I'm so positive on physical retail, because I think we're seeing it change from a digital perspective. And actually, this next slide 12, is just it's a perfect example of what's changing. So I think that retail is changing as a hub for one-stop shopping, and I think that I personally believe that the next thing that we'll see change is the payment platform, so that it's completely integrated, and we won't be, kind of having to think about getting at whether it's a cash, checks are almost, I don't think we see checks as a method of payment much anymore. And I think we'll end up seeing, everything else become completely frictionless. And so, and retail, I think, will serve as a platform for that. So we'll be able to go into a store and we'll be able to take care of our whole lives there. And maybe medical eventually as well. I mean, we see CVS serving as this, we can go in and take care of most of our healthcare needs at this point. But we'll be able to get our hair cut. If you're a man, you'll be able to get a shave. I mean, but it'll serve as this platform for our lives, and it'll be this digital integration as well. And so I think that's where the physical platform is so important.
Which is fascinating. Deborah, which is fascinating because if you think of the way retail was really conceived, which begins, at least in the modern age, with the department store, with one-stop shopping. As it's changed and evolved, and as you're pointing out, with the digital component becoming much more important, that whole experience now comes back full circle to become what you're saying is a hub for one-stop shopping, which is totally on the mark.
Right. No, and I think that this is where, consumers' expectations will continue to increase in terms of retailers being in stock as well. Because if you're going to the store, right, your expectations are, right, I'm going to go to this one particular location, I'm going to take care of all of my needs, but I need to make sure that they're in stock and that they will become loyal, I think, to the store or to the brand that is able to take care of all their needs in one-stop shopping. If we look at the next slide, this is also very interesting. So, right, we live in a world where, social media, influencers, live streaming are having a significant impact. In China, WeChat, which has become a payment platform, a life platform, if you will, right? You can pay, you can order dinner, you can order tickets, you can order you can pay your utilities, everything in terms of just one platform. But it shows you, right, where we all used to think that the Super Bowl was kind of the everything. We're seeing that all these other kind of platforms are having a significant impact on our lives and how we think about, the future and the power. So I like to show this slide in terms of where we think about investing our dollars with regards to marketing and how these kind of social media influencers are having such a significant impact in terms of how the consumer buys and in some cases, such as WeChat, how the consumer sells as well. So on this slide, we think about the next wave of disruptors in retail. So we're already seeing in some stores robotics, actually augmented reality. I was just at the Shanghai Starbucks, and it's powered by Alibaba, and they have this Tmall Catch the Cat. And so basically the store, I call it, it kind of comes to life, and you feel like you're basically inside a game. And the store is so large that there's actually like a map, a physical map of the store.
Wow.
And yeah, it's really unbelievable. But I think it's just it is a map for what we can see in terms of the future of retail. And it is also powered by artificial intelligence as well. And, this idea of virtual reality also. But I think there's so much, and I think 2018 will be this year where we see investments in, kind of these four disruptors, and we'll also see them come to life. And obviously AI is powering all of these, but I do think that the opportunity for retailers to rethink their physical footprint and to, I think, once again, be more positive on how the physical box interacts with the consumer and the opportunity for them to move forward is quite significant. So on the next slide, I think that, Amazon is capturing the majority of e-commerce growth at this point. But I don't think that that's necessarily, that I wouldn't say the book is not necessarily written. And we are seeing, Walmart with 50% e-commerce growth. We're seeing, obviously players outside the US like Alibaba with significant growth as well. But we have seen Amazon with incredible innovation, really thinking outside the box, private label. Obviously, Alexa's having a significant impact. So, just one that I think we all know, but, certainly has to be stated as well.
And here's a quick question for you, Deborah. Alibaba, do you think that that'll be much more important as, let's say, a competitor to Amazon in the US in the next few years?
So this is very interesting. So Alibaba is a platform, right? Not a retailer. So right, they don't take ownership of any inventory. So that's the differentiating point. And JD takes ownership of inventory. So just want to kind of for points of differentiation. And one of the things that's very interesting is, Alibaba had these two gateway summits. One was in Detroit and one was in Toronto. And the idea was to show small business owners how they could work with Alibaba in terms of, new and differentiated products that could be sold into China for the Chinese consumer. And the idea was, right, there's a consumer here who is very hungry for new and differentiated products. And so I actually believe that the greater issue might be, whereas, right, these small business owners would have naturally thought of selling their new and differentiated product here in the US, that they may think of China first, as opposed to the US first for products. That may be my bigger concern in the near term, as opposed to anything else. In the US right now, we have AliExpress, and they have amazing and interesting products, sometimes at a fraction of the price where we might buy it here, but I think that the platform is still lesser known. That's not to say that there may not be, I think there's quite significant growth, but I worry more about the small business owners, because I think they're being so powered right now and so empowered as well in terms of selling products into China. But it's a great question and a great point.
All right, so, should we move into the 7 surprises, Deborah?
Yes. I like to always do a review and a preview. So the first one is not a positive one, but it must be addressed. And
wrap our head around it a certain way, right?
yes. So we have seen, and the year is not over, but the greatest number of store closings in history this year. And there's certainly a tale to be told here, but I don't think that it necessarily, once again, writes the book going forward, because I do think there's a lot of new innovation and excitement of things that can happen as we go forward. So I do think that we can think differently about the future. And I think that retailers are investing in in-store experiences. As we talked about Walmart with this buy online, pick up in store, there are opportunities to work with, many of these, influencers in terms of in-store appearances. But, this obviously was, there's no way to put it. I mean, it was a dreadful year in terms of store closures. I do think that there are opportunities for the landlords to, and we're starting to see this, right? Think outside the box with regards to interesting and new technologies, working with startups, not to name any specific names, but there really are some very interesting technologies that are percolating. So I am more positive on 2018, but this was obviously not particularly positive.
Yeah, no, it's not. And there's been a fair amount of news, though, on retailers that have reallocated resources while they've been closing stores and trying to make better use of them, of the money that was, I guess set aside in that case, or saved, however you want to look at it. And like you mentioned about the in-store experience and perhaps going for a smaller footprint, or reconsidering how they're using their stores. And I think that's going to be a thing that pays off in upcoming years, and may not look great right now, like you're pointing out, but it's going to pay off.
And I also think that in addition to new technologies, I also think that the physical store in many cases also needs some investment as well. And I also, not only in terms of their existing boxes, but the new box of the future, I do think that this idea of the consumer, everyone is time starved, right? We're increasingly on our devices, we're pulled in many directions, and we're always on. And so I think that if I've been a big believer of these more efficient stores. And so if I can shop in a, more efficient format, and I do think customer service is increasingly important. So whether it's a chatbot, whether it's a robot greeter that can help me in the store, if I can get in and out of the box in a faster, kind of point of view, there's actually carts that follow you around the store, so I can be hands-free, right? I can be on my cell phone. I mean, there's so many technologies that I do think, right, anything that we can do to encourage the consumer to shop and engage in consumption, I think that, right, the consumer has, right, there is consuming power right now. We just, I think, have to help them along the way, right? Because they're spending on experiences, right? So can that experience be in the store?
Exactly.
And that's an open-ended question. So I certainly have my own opinion on the answer. So, and actually, I think that leads perfectly into number 2, which is a surge in M&A activity, where this idea of thinking about how could we look different in this new retail world, right? We saw many announcements. We saw, many retailers thinking, right, Nordstrom's, Abercrombie, Deckers, BJ's, thinking about how their future may look different. And, right, I mean, the, kind of jury is still out. And then if we look on the next slide, I mean, this is just a taste of what happened. It's not even the full kind of list. I mean, this is just kind of notable announced retail M&A, and this is just in the US. I mean, like I said, this is just a sample. I mean, it is more extensive than this. So there is a long list of things happening in retail and M&A activity, and I think it's all positive because I think the retailers have woken up to we're in a new world, and there are many interesting startups and smaller companies who are doing some very interesting things, and they are able to power larger, more established companies. And if there can be partnership and collaboration, whether it's formal or informal, obviously what we're listing here is more formal relationships. I think that it is significantly positive in terms of driving the top line and the bottom line as well.
And Walmart's been very busy, obviously, as we saw by the last three there and highlighted on this slide.
So Walmart has been very busy. I think that they understand this new retail world, as we call it. So, right, it's this, kind of, whether it's offline to online or online to offline, digitally enabled, influencer enabled world. And the, kind of destination, retailer. And however we think about that in a different way, and like I said, this platformatization, I will create my own word, that Walmart is engaging in, and also working with influencers in a new and different way, I think it's fantastic. And I think it's this, Walmart, from my, entire retail history, was always out in front. And I think that we're seeing them out in front again. And I think and you know what I think is happening? It's driving the entire industry to take a look inward and step up to the plate. And I think it's very positive. And this is what we're seeing on the next slide is, number 4 is Walmart's explosive e-commerce growth. I mean, these numbers are absolutely impressive. And the growth of e-commerce, since the acquisition of Jet, which, whether it was, insights that they've taken, whether it, allowed them to be more confident, but the numbers have been off the charts. And so, right, it's giving other players in the industry, a chance to, rethink their own strategies, and also, I think, a sense of inspiration. So I think it's all positive. And, right, a lot of it is that there's, new tools available, but it's also the, I think, once again, the inspiration from Jet, and some of these acquisitions have also powered them as well. I think the next slide, considering the size of Alibaba, we were actually at their analyst meeting when this was announced, and I don't think I've ever, I think it was silent for a moment while we all took a minute to digest this, but 50% revenue guidance is a big number when you consider the size of the company. So this is really impressive, and they have delivered. And they have been incredibly innovative. They have really changed the game, and I think that we will continue to see, and their technology investments, right? They announced $15 billion in terms of R&D. So there is significant growth here. I think there will continue to be, and the amount of, if you will, different applications going forward, and right, we're seeing, and what they're doing, right, is right, they're partnering with many U.S. retailers in terms of new technology growth as well. So that's also what we're seeing is, right, this east to west. We're also seeing many new technologies being incorporated back into U.S. retailers as well. And then this has been, I think, a very interesting source of inspiration as well, is this online, we call it O2O in Asia, but just the numbers are absolutely impressive, which we show on the next slide. And not only the amount of pop-ups, which we see a lot, I would say a lot more of these in China, and a lot of it is just to drive interesting formats, right? The consumer there is always looking for new and different because, right, their expectations, I think, are just so much higher. And, right, but the store collaborations and acquisitions and then the physical stores, and one of the things, and maybe we should change, but, right, you've got the Target and Harry's partnership now, in terms of on slide 24, but what we're seeing in terms of some of these, Target is also doing some very interesting partnerships. And so, right, with Casper and, they're really starting to think outside the box, but also Macy's is as well, right? So Macy's with Samsung and with Beta. And so, right, we're starting to see some of these, more established retailers getting, more aggressive in terms of thinking about, how to partner with some of these, more, if you will, interesting retailers. So we're seeing kind of cross-retailer, it's interesting. Cross-retailer partnerships. We're seeing, if you will, partnerships with online and offline retailers. It's really this partnership model that I think is driving a lot of growth. And I think that's really positive. And we saw a lot of it in 2017. I think we'll see even more of it in 2018.
Which is fascinating, right? Because if you think about it, it's, as you say, new retail meeting, let's say, incumbent retail, and making a whole new world of positive experiences for consumers, which is actually quite positive.
Right. That's exactly it. And so, that's all that, I hope for is, right, these new positive experiences, because I think consumers' expectations are higher. I think, right, I love the pop-up model, right, because it's, and I think even, right, especially around this time of year, right, you go to the mall and like there's no dark real estate in the mall, right, the whole mall is full. But I think that if we can have that model year round, right, the consumer is just, it just drives, right, this huge sense of excitement, and, it's like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to see today, but I know I'm going to see something amazing, and that drives, right, additional trips. But I think it also drives additional trips into, right, like a Target where it's like, oh, I don't know, am I going to see Harry's? Am I going to see Casper? Like, what am I going to see? Oh, wow, what's new? And so it's this sense of, right, surprise and delight, right? It's, right, I don't know what I'm going to see today, but I know I'm going to see something amazing. And so I think that that's great. And actually that leads us into our next slide, number 7, which is our final one, was the Amazon acquisition of Whole Foods, which I don't think I had ever seen any, the media pick up on anything, to such great extent. And, right, and now you walk into a Whole Foods and, right, they've taken, this is a great picture in terms of how they're already carrying so many of much Amazon merchandise, and, right, the cross-pollination that we've already seen to such an extent. So, and if we go to the next slide, right, we wanted to have a bonus where this launching of the store number 8 incubator, for any of you who've had the opportunity to spend some time in Bentonville, it is amazing the amount of startups that are in that community. The amount of VCs, I would tell you, if you spend time there, and if you don't, I would encourage you to, because there is already an amazing startup community. And I think Walmart, with the official launch of store number 8, they have done an amazing, kind of formalizing this, kind of incubator, or, and taking a lot of the startups that are already kind of local, and starting to, invest and drive some of this, if you will, accelerator activity. So I wanted to applaud them in terms of what they're doing from that perspective. So turning now towards what we think we'll see for next year, which, right, it's like the review preview.
There you go.
AI is probably the topic that we've heard the most about, I would say, in the last 6 weeks. And coming off of the Fortune Global Forum in Guangzhou, there was a very interesting conversation by the CEO of Cisco and talking about smart cities and how they're starting one in Guangzhou, and just the opportunity from that perspective and how quickly things can move from kind of idea to actually happening. And he had said, right, in a period of less than 6 months, they had this idea of, having a smart city to actually breaking ground in Guangzhou. And so I think that's actually the power in some ways of AI is, right, you take all of this data and then you can actually do something with it in an incredibly short period of time. And, right, the more, more data beats better algorithms. And so, right, the amount of data that comes out of retail is truly, and maybe you guys can just say something to that, is truly unbelievable. So I'll let you guys just take that and run with it for a second.
Sure. I think the power of AI is incredible. And I think we've seen, much like you mentioned, we've seen retailers talk about it more and more across the board. And we've seen many reports talk about AI. And what's interesting is that they are starting 5 years ago. It was never even an idea, at least in retail. And it's been around for a while. But what's fascinating is how now they're talking about execution and how to start adopting some of the AI possibilities in terms of specific solutions into their processes in order to tie back to the experience.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So we see that, some of the themes through today's webinar have been this idea of personalization, customization, and localization. And I do think that those are, some of the most important things that retailers can do to differentiate. And, that's what, AI can power. And so I think that if we, look on slide 29, Alibaba was very aggressive in utilizing AI for Double 11. And one of the things that they talked about was this 20% higher conversion rate, and also this idea of personalized shopping pages for Taobao. So Taobao is kind of basically means like discovery, and is more of kind of their influencer driven kind of basically shopping, and so versus Tmall, which is more brands. And so they had 6.7 billion personalized shopping pages. And so this is where, right, and this is what I have personally always dreamed of, is that you feel the retailer knows you. And so, right, these are platforms, but, right, this idea of that, and so once again, right, with Taobao, it's so many different, kind of brands selling into you that it helps you weed through all of this different merchandise. But imagine going to a platform, imagine, kind of going to the Amazon platform, the Tmall platform, the Taobao platform, and everything is served up to you on a plate, and you're like, it will obviously increase conversion, increase basket size, but it's a significant opportunity. And then on slide 30, yeah.
All I was going to say, Deborah, was it's a good case of less is more sometimes when it's personalized.
Oh, absolutely. Right, because we can all, I think, become completely overwhelmed when we're shopping. And if there's too much, sometimes we'll just we'll just abandon our baskets sometimes. Right, because we'll get to the end of our shopping journey and we're like, wow, I didn't really want that. Or when we come into the shopping journey, we're just overwhelmed. We just, kind of tune out. So I do think that that's exactly right. And then on slide 30, this idea, and I think this is something that always makes, for some reason, this is a slide I borrowed from NVIDIA, but it absolutely makes retailers feel very comfortable. Because it's this idea that AI itself has actually been around for quite some time. And I would say the newest piece of it is deep learning, but even that's been around for quite some time. And so I think the applications are newer, more perfected, but we're at a place in time where I think the cost and that's the piece of it, because it's not expensive, right? I think if you're going to if you're going to look at an AI strategy today, whatever that might be, you can get started, and I think you can implement it very quickly, and you can outsource most of this. And if we look on slide 31, right, why is it important? Is because I think that there is so much opportunity out there, and it's a significant way, I think, to cater to your customers. And I think this idea of action amongst your peer set. And on slide 32, this is a very interesting, we borrowed this from Gartner, but they surveyed, I think, a significant amount of CIOs, and it was this idea in terms of the growth amongst different, kind of technologies. And what was amazing was, right, AI had the greatest percentage with regards to growth. Now, conversational interfaces, that didn't even exist in 2015, so I guess technically that was probably the greatest growth. But what we're seeing is there's a significant amount of interest with regards to these new technologies. And so we believe that 2018 will be a significant year for AI and also for these conversational interfaces. So slide 33, we've talked about new retail throughout this, kind of journey today. So I think that, but this is, one of my favorite slides. And I do think that one of the things that we don't have in the US is QR codes. So it's not super applicable, but everything in China, because WeChat is driven by QR codes, right? Because it's super simple. So even if you want to call them homeless people or people who, where you would give people who live on the street, where you give them money, they actually have signs around their neck with a QR code. So you can actually donate money to them that way. But it's just such a different way, and everything it goes back to this idea of frictionless. So when you're thinking outside the box, when retailers are thinking outside the box, anything you can think about doing that makes it easier for a consumer to interact with you will gain mind share and market share. So that is my main message. And so any one thing, and I think about it, it's a small win. So if each quarter in 2018, you can think about what will be my small win this quarter. So maybe in the first quarter, it's chatbots. Maybe in the second quarter, it's, a smart mirror. Maybe in the third quarter, it's robotics. But that is how I think about it, so that it doesn't get overwhelming. And then on slide 34, if we think about, so this is just looking at applications of AI. I like to look at the natural language processing, the piece of this, but also even just the logistics. So what we saw here, if you look at I guess technically like the second column, so like the use of the DeepQ networks, Alibaba could determine the best fit for products, and it saved 5% of overall packaging costs. So from like a logistics perspective, and then in the last column from Dian Xiaomi, could understand more than 90% of customer inquiries. So we're just seeing this, kind of fairly aggressive use of chatbots in Asia, which I think is, just increasing customer service at a pretty aggressive rate. And then we have, we're almost at the end. There was a recent announcement by ThreadUp, and we just think this is the beginning of announcements that we'll see, going into the end of the year, but we think 2018 will be the year of AI announcements. But they talked about, offering AI-powered goodie boxes. So I thought that was, kind of very interesting. And it's just $20. And so, the customer receives 10 to 20 secondhand items. But I do think that's exciting and that's interesting, not only from a customer perspective, but also from a company perspective. And so just to wrap up, our key takeaways, retail is obviously being disrupted because consumers have, their expectations have significant, and I think it's significant evolution, right? It's convenience, personalization, and speed. And then number two, I think that the eyebrow raising moment was just store closings. I think that is really the aha moment, and everyone took pause at that. And then lastly, I think AI is the tipping point, right? Like I said, the last 6 weeks have really been a major discussion point, and I think it's all about the small wins. So I think that's how everyone should think about 2018 is just getting started, and it's not expensive. And then lastly, we are going to be speaking about, we've got a panel on AI at NRF, and I'll turn it back over to you guys.
There you go. So Jose, so I wanted to make sure, Jose, you have any other takeaways around what we just learned from Deborah. If there's anything else you wanted to reinforce there. And we have time probably for one question since we're coming up at the top of the hour here.
Well, actually, just a quick thing. Deborah, it was great to be on the journey with you this afternoon, and I fully agree with your takeaways. And I think that that last one certainly resonated, I think, with all of us in this room, which is AI is at a tipping point for all retailers, not just the new retailers that you spoke about, but also for the incumbent retailers as they're starting to adapt and adopt different types of, let's say, solutions to their existing processes.
Absolutely. So let's cover one question, Deborah. If you could take one, okay? We'll do one, and then the other ones that we don't get to, we can answer afterwards in the form of the follow-up email or along with the recording. So you mentioned AI as a trend. If you could name, I don't know, maybe just a handful of retailers that are doing an effective job at what you described, and it could be some of the well-known ones, maybe some of the ones you already covered, some of the ones you already had called out. But what retailers are adopting AI into their overall process, and I'm guessing by process they mean, into the larger process, even beyond the MP&A process.
So I think that it's interesting, right? So if you look at the retailers that actually are joining us at NRF, I think it's a good representation of those who are on the journey. So I know that Costa Bella, and actually there are three very different stories. So Costa Bella, they've got two different AI approaches right now. The journey hasn't been a smooth one. It was kind of fits and starts, and so but they just kept at it, and they've seen a significant increase in terms of return on ad spend. They've seen significant improvement in terms of they do like personalized pages. They're working with chatbots. I mean, they've been very I would say innovative, and they have really stuck to it. And right, if one thing didn't work, then they moved into another category. With regards to 1-800-Flowers, they have figured out kind of this personalized kind of what the consumer wants in terms of different flower arrangements, and so this idea of a much more personalized gifting process. And then eBay is actually on a journey, I would say a very significant one, and is utilizing AI in many different aspects of their business. I'll just go down and give one example.
Okay.
But they're actually working on image recognition. So you can actually scan an item and then try and find it from one of eBay's sellers. And so this is one of the reasons where you as a seller might want to work with eBay. But they are, I would say, in terms of those whom we have, right, because we're trying to find great examples to encourage others to, if you will, kind of take that first step and have that small win. eBay has been if you will, a retailer who has taken some steps and has, I would say, seen some pretty amazing wins so far. So great question.
And well, I mean, it's a good segue into your session, and it seems like that individual should definitely attend your session at NRF this year, as should most that are on the call right now. So that's great. So let's wrap it up at this point. We're coming close to the top of the hour, and Deborah, thank you for carving out some time today, and Jose, thank you too. I will make sure to get these slides out as soon as humanly possible today to everybody, so you can digest some of this. There's a lot of content here that we fit in the hour. So there'll be plenty of slides for you to move through. We will send out the recording also in the next day or so, and you're welcome to watch that as many times as you want. If you have any questions coming out of that, just let us know. I have a slide here for that. You have Deborah's email if you want to send her anything. You also have emails for Jose and for me. So feel free to use them. Deborah, thanks so much again.
Thanks again for the invitation.
Anytime. Happy holidays, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.